Ladies, gentlemen, and hurrah of all ages, with the Season 7 PTR opening up for Diablo 4 in just a few days, and with the full patch notes dropping recently, I wanted to sit down and break down everything that you need to know about Season 7 that we know so far, as well as any specifics for the PTR for anyone engaging with that early too. And while a PTR won't stop a lot of people from playing a full new game, it is worth noting it's extremely unlikely to be a coincidence that the PTR for the meatiest looking season we've had in a while as far as the actual seasonal powers, build changes, and new things to do and adjustment of systems on a seasonal level 2 is going to release during the exact same time period as Path of Exile 2's early access. So in a lot of ways this feels like it will be the direct comparison of the two games. Path of Exile 2's early access is of course an incomplete game, but they have acknowledged that and laid out plans for the future, on top of the fact that what's already in the game is already quite expansive and impressive looking too. So how does Diablo 4's Season 7 compare? Is this a meaty enough season to really actually compete with it? Well, first things first, the whole season is essentially based around the Tree of Whispers, and this extends out to witches, and witchcraft is a concept within the world too. As a part of this, the Tree of Whispers itself is going to be expanded upon to make it a more usable, proper main like hub town, and there will be a new enemy type called Headrotten added to the game with this. These will appear either in Roothold dungeons, which are a new type of mini dungeon opened with sigils that exclusively drop from Whispers of the Dead caches, or they spawn as part of the Headhunt activity, which is a new sub-zone takeover activity that gives you enhanced and altered grim favors for the Whisper of the Dead activities. This rotates to be in one zone at a time, sort of like Helltide, but obviously not Helltide. Within this zone there will also be a Raven acting as an emissary that you can interact with to hand in your Whisper's favors without having to leave the zone and despawn enemies, just to avoid those sort of overlaps at least a bit. Though personally I still think that they should just make this simpler and have it so grim favors stack up sort of infinitely as much as you want them to, so you can hand in like 40 at a time to get 4 boxes in a row. I don't really see why it doesn't work that way to begin with. It's not like that would let you bridge the gap between Eternal and Seasonal, but that's sort of beside the point. Killing head-rotten enemies gives you Restless Rot, which is a resource tied specifically to the new Witchcraft seasonal powers. These are essentially one of 2 seasonal power-up systems for Season 7. As well, as a result of these headhunt zones and how they work, you can also spawn 2 special head-rotten bosses. These are the Headless Husk and the Fugitive Head. These drop specific items that can be exchanged for Occult Gems at the Tree of Whispers, and the Occult Gems are the other seasonal power-up. They are essentially 2 sides of the same coin, with Occult Gems essentially acting as modifiers for the Witchcraft system. That said, let's break down all of the Witchcraft powers that we know about and all of the Occult Gems that affect them. The Witchcraft system itself is similar to the Vampiric power system from Season 2. You have 5 slots that you can fill with regular Witchcraft and 1 slot for unique Witchcraft, and each Witchcraft option can be upgraded to a maximum of at least level 15 as the highest denotation that we've seen so far in the blog. These range quite widely in their actual effects and are split between 4 categories, with the first 3 categories mostly being unlocked by giving Restless Rot to one of 3 altars that will be available near the Tree of Whispers. The 4th category of Witchcraft comes from Lost Altars, and these are things that you'll be able to find within specific dungeons across the map. As well, some Witchcraft will be specifically locked to the Reputation track according to developers too, so that is worth knowing about as well. But we'll talk about that a bit more later on. I'll show all the Witchcraft options on the screen here of course, but mostly I'll just be highlighting ones that I think will either be strong or just generally fun. Firebat Servants is something that should be fun, at least visually speaking. Abyssal Resonance has potential for high resource spending builds like Rod of Kepaleke for Spiritborn, even with it being nerfed quite hard in Season 7. Wave of Woe, especially at rank 5, also seems like it has a lot of possible strength, especially for things like basic skill builds, which oftentimes lean a bit more towards both attack speed and a bit more of a single target focus too, and it can help expand upon that. Purging Touch has good synergy potential if one of the Eldritch powers ends up being insanely strong within itself. Shaken Soul fills the need for Vulnerable in most builds, which is a great thing to free up some classes a little bit. And then Doom Orb is just a big orbiting damage machine that at higher ranks gains stacks of increasing damage when it kills enemies or damages bosses, and then explodes when it reaches full stacks for a chunk of damage as well. Psyche powers include things like Lifelink, which literally is a damage reflect that can even become a guaranteed crit at rank 15 of this effect, so this probably has some silly potential for things like pit pushing in higher ranks and higher tiers with certain crit focused builds later on. Vengeful Spirit is interesting. Every 19 seconds it spawns a spirit that takes all of the damage instead of you, and then it explodes when it dies for some damage too, but likely by the time that we reach endgame, survivability will make this sort of obsolete. Growth and Decay includes powers like Poison Frog Servant, which is just a little poison frog guy that does damage over time and then also explodes on death for a guaranteed crit too. At rank 5 it can pull enemies in and it will even taunt them. Soul Harvest has a ton of potential as well, giving you 3% primary stat increase per cooldown skill usage per nearby monster for 3 seconds. Not only does it seem like the duration scales with ranks to the power, which is really good, but also at rank 9, the duration doesn't even decay at all if enemies are still nearby. This doesn't list a cap to that of any kind, and if there genuinely is no cap, then this will be absolutely busted and broken in every way, especially in closed environments like dungeons or pit runs or infernal hordes. Decay augmentation changes these witchcraft damage effects to become damage over time for an effect that matches your class, of course, say poison for rogues or spiritborn, bleeding for barbarian. Say, for example, you want to use Wave of Woe to echo damage, but you're a damage over time focused build. Now you can echo your damage over time into more damage over time. Then finally, there are 4 lost powers as well. Breath of the Coven grants attack speed for each unique witchcraft effect that has applied crowd control to an enemy, and gives 40% bonus lucky hit chance if all of these are active at the same time once you reach rank 8. Hex specialization simply increases the potency of all of your hex effects from the witchcraft, and at rank 10 increases critical chance against hexed enemies. Aura specialization increases the size of all auras, which could get sort of fun in theory, and at rank 10 increases crit damage by 50% against enemies that are within any aura, which theoretically would be a multiplier, and as such could well be quite strong. Then finally we have Tornado. This one is just awesome. It spawns a really cool visual spectacle if an enemy is affected by both a hex and aura at the same time. It pulls enemies in, and at rank 5 it moves towards enemies too. Unfortunately, there is a 20-second internal cooldown between spawns of this tornado, so there's no like Tornado Dust Devil style multi just shooting them out repeatedly built in the making, but I wish there was. Then we all have the Occult Gems as well, and we know quite a good chunk of these, if not all of them honestly. These go in your jewelry slot, and each of them gives you bonus armor and all elemental resist to try and make up for what you're replacing in the regular jewelry gem slots. There are 3 that each give potency to different witchcraft styles. Say you're heavy in on Wave of Woe or something like Soul Harvest, these just let you boost those specific styles even further. Phantom String gives you bonus overpowers against hexed enemies, making a clear synergy between hex and overpower to work around here, even further if you combine the Elder Sigil in with it too. Killing Wind gives you movement speed and crit chance with 3 or more Eldritch powers selected, which is quite a lot of power, and Witching Hour makes core skills count as Eldritch 2 once every 5 seconds, which is quite interesting in itself, especially with the fact that you can, as rogues, make grenade or trap skills count as core skills now with these Scoundrel Leather changes that were in the patch notes, and also the fact that Death Trap is an ultimate that can now count as an Eldritch skill with this sort of interaction. Voice of the Stars makes an aura and ultimate synergy that gives ultimate skills every different witchcraft tag and increases their damage just in general. Mind Wreath gives cooldown reduction with 3 or more Psyche powers equipped. Cornucopia gives barrier generation, fortify generation, and thorns with 3 or more growth and decay powers equipped. Vulture Talon speeds up the effects of all damage over time. Pointed Finger creates a minion and hex synergy type for your build. Friend of the Bog gives you a bunch of primary stat, which is great, maximum life, and permanent unhindered for having 3 or more growth and decay powers active too. Moonlight Ward gives damage reduction and max element resistance per rank of equipped unique power, and this could scale quite ridiculously. The highest rank that we've seen on any witchcraft power so far is 15 for one of the extra bonuses, so assuming that unique powers can also hit rank 15, that would put this at 45% damage reduction and 15% bonus maximum resistances, so that would actually be quite a meaty defensive option for a single jewelry gem slot. And this is all the stuff that is season exclusive, and it's honestly extremely meaty and massive. Aside from that, we have permanent game additions like a number of new runes, with only 3 being shown so far, which are these, the interesting ones being Igni as a generator for basic skill builds to gain rune offering, and Nagu potentially for companion or minion builds. Not to mention they are also adding a number of new legendary aspects and uniques for each class too, specifically creating a new Earthquake style of play for Barbarian, some new Bloodwave options for Necromancer, a new Shadow Imbuement playstyle for Rogue, some interesting new Hurricane Werewolf options for Druid 2, and some new Ball Lightning potential in 2 different styles for Sorcerer 2. Not to mention also a Spiritborn playstyle based around using focus and potency skills and interweaving them together, which is quite a lot of fun in theory. Then of course we had the full patch notes revealed for the PTR yesterday, so we'll talk very briefly about the more standout parts here and how they will be having a larger effect, as we did cover the patch notes themselves in full detail yesterday already. Basically, to sum it up then, Spiritborn is getting nerfed by having all the bugs fixed and Rod of Kepaleke tuned down a fair amount, but it's also being buffed in other ways to make the underperforming builds catch up too, and add to the build variety for the top end potential of the class, with a specific focus on updating Razor Wings to make it a lot more usable in multiple different ways, and also ultimate skills in general, with the Seeker probably being the one that's the most workable to actually build around. This same philosophy has also been brought across the board for most of the other classes too, and essentially the goals for every single class was to increase their power as a whole, while giving a bit of extra love and attention to some underused, underpowered skills for each class too, trying to make more playstyles actually viable at the top end. Barbarian got a lot of further boost to Earthquake than we had found out about about before, and some Hammer of the Ancients buffs in general too, but also ultimate skills like Iron Maelstrom have quite a lot of potential now with all the new changes that have been made around them. For Druid, there were some actual proper Spirit Boon reworks, which is quite a big deal, and I can definitely see a strong Cataclysm build possibly cropping up due to the Mjolnir Ring now making Cataclysm scale off of your Lightning Bolt boosts and bonuses as well. Rogues have some really interesting stuff going on, especially around Scoundrel's Leathers, which I talked about earlier in its new implicit affix, and Necromancer has some very great changes across the board too, especially for minion style builds, and Sorcerer has just gotten a ton of reworks and buffs to try and make you feel less pigeonholed into being either a burning or conjuration focused build in the endgame, which honestly are looking quite solid overall. All the sorcerers I know, including Josh of course, are quite happy with the changes. That just about does it then, everyone. Your full preview of the Season 7 PTR that's coming up, and of course it's worth noting that because this is all focused around the PTR, it's all going to be tested by loads of players, and by the time Season 7 actually rolls around, there could of course be a bunch of new changes or just adjustments to these ones that we've talked about here. There could be things in here that were altered, and that's the whole point of the PTR, but as of this point, heading into December, this is everything that we've been told about Season 7, and it is looking quite big and honestly just fun to me, which is the main thing that I care about above all else for the game. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.